What is going on? Welcome back to another YouTube video. Last week I had Mr. Tom Parsons aka PredPoker on and we went through a DTO spot and it seems to have been very well received, and a lot of people want me to do educational content, and the truth is I've never made content like that, so I'm not really sure where to start. But what I'm going to do with Tom is we're going to do a running series once every 2 weeks. We're going to get on to DTO. We're going to pick a spot. I'm going to try and pick the most common ones because I think it makes the most sense to go over them. First week we did button versus big blind, just a single raise pot. Today we are going to do 3-bet pots. If there's any spots that you would like to see myself and Tom go over, please do get in the comments. Let us know what you'd like to see. But without further ado, welcome Tom. Welcome back, mate.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Always. All right, so we're going to do what we did last time. We're going to be using DTO. The spot we're going to go over is cutoff versus button 3-bet pot. I think of all the positions to practice, it's probably one of the most common stack sizes at 45 big blinds that you're going to see 3-bets. And on top of that, it's just one of the most common positions. Of course, we could do under the gun versus button, or we could do, you know, middle position versus small blind. But I think we're going to see a lot of re-raising in most people's games in these positions. All right. So we are going to jump into the ranges, like I said. First off, we are going to look at what the button is re-raising. It might be a slightly bit small, but I will talk you through it. So one thing that I think most people need to note, and some people might fail to do, is that a lot of the hands are going to be mixes. And if you look at it here, like these hands over here, ace jack, ace 10, king jack, king 10, queen jack, queen 10, jack 10, etc. Right? If you look at that, it's 0.4, 0.6, 0.3, 0.5, 0.6, 0.3, 0.5. I think it's impossible. You can't think like that, right? I think it's close to impossible. So it's not the cleanest method in the world, but the way I would do this is I would just 3-bet them half the time, and I would 3-bet all of them half the time, and I would not worry about it, right? Now, obviously, ace queen here is only getting 3-bet 10% of the time, so that wouldn't fall into that. But these ones that are around 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, I would just make them all 50% re-raises. And one thing that I feel I see a lot in lower stakes, you can tell me if it's how you would play or how it's not, but these hands, king jack suited, king 10 suited, queen 9 suited, all of these hands at lower stakes, I think you tend to see players click call rather than re-raise.
Yes.
Would you find these for raises half the time?
Not half the time. Sometimes, like, because generally what I'd always sort of thought in 3-bet pots, I was like, oh, if it's suited, like calling your position's fine. And I would never really worry about 3-betting unless it was against like a specific player.
Okay.
But it's crazy that it is sort of half the time with even like king jack
So
suited,
the one thing about these spots is that it's very, very sensitive to stack depth. And as you get deeper, what you'll see is there'll be a preference for the suited hands even. So like if you get to like 80, 100 big blinds, like you're going to prefer actually re-raising a lot of the time with the suited hands, because you're going to be able to take more heat if you do get 4-bet. And there's going to be more playability when the pot gets very big. But at 45 big blinds, we're kind of at the threshold where like these hands are getting mixed in. But if you brought this down to 25, 30 big blinds, like these hands, like the king 10 suited, the king jack suited, they're gonna just be pure calls, right? So like we're starting to get to the stack depth where you see it, and then like at 60 you're gonna see it more. But it's something to note that you do have these hands, and it's important. If you look at the 9x and the 8x, they get used very heavily. And another thing which I don't think we see a huge amount at lower stakes is that, even to be honest, at like mid stakes and when I play higher stakes, except for against like some of the top players, like these pairs are still getting 3-bet, right? Like you're 3-betting 9s half the time. You're pretty much pure 3-betting 10s plus at 45 big blinds. So it's just worth noting. And then if we look at the cutoffs range and how they're going to respond versus this, what do you notice about this range? Like what?
It's immediately it's a lot wider than I would have expected.
Okay,
Like it's obviously primarily filled with suited hands as well, like
yeah.
ace x and king x, but like as low down as king 4, king 5 suited, just essentially pure calling to me is like that's just something that I don't have at the minute.
Yeah. To be honest, like these kind of calls, depending on how your opponent is constructing a re-raising range, like it might not be the smartest thing in the world, right? Because like look at this range, right? Like we're ahead of a lot of these suited hands. We're going to flush a lot of these suited hands. We just have the best hand against a lot of them, right? If your opponent has none of these and your opponent has 10s, ace queen, like, calling king 4 suited, it's not going to be the greatest thing in the world potentially. But it's something to note. Another thing that I think is very important here is that, yes, you noted that it is mostly suited hands. You can see that, but we don't have 9s plus, right? Like 9s is 10% of the time. 10s we don't have. We have 0 ace king and we have very little ace queen, right? So what that means is that our opponent, when we're playing out of position, is going to have all of the overpairs on 7 high boards, 8 high boards, And they might be spots where we're facing a lot of heat and facing some big bets. But boards around the top, like as in like Broadway boards and stuff, like we have amazing coverage on, right? So like those boards, our opponents might have to be a little bit more respectful on at times, and they won't be always range betting. I find 3-bet pots challenging enough because they're always, you're playing them at different stack sizes, you're playing them against different opponents. So we're going to do what we did last time. I'm just going to try my very best to give my thought process. I'm going to try and probe Tom for his thought process, and we're just going to kind of try and learn together. We won't always get it right, but that is part of fun. So the first hand that we are going to jump into is Queen Jack 10, and we are sitting with what I would say is a pretty big hand. What would you tend to do on this board?
On this board, I would tend to bet a quarter, but I've just got like bad habits because I've never really looked at 3-bet pots. For the most part, if I'm in position, I'm just regularly betting a quarter, and there's not many big bets unless it's on like low boards.
Yeah,
this kind of board, I would just bet a quarter. Usually,
there's going to be it's kind of what I say all the time when I talk to someone who's playing. I'm just like, if you're not sure what to do, c betting small, a lot of the time it's just going to be an effective strategy because people will overfold. The one thing that I didn't touch on, as you said, that you haven't really worked on 3-bet pots. These hands that I mentioned that like you might just call when they want you to 3-bet them a lot, like the King Jack off, the King 10 suited, like this stuff. If you actually went in and dived into your database, what you would most likely find is that when you 3-bet those hands, they outperform when you flat them by an obscene amount, because people will overfold your 3-bet. People are going to overfold versus continuation bets in 3-bet pots. So if you are playing during the week and you're not sure whether you should re-raise or not pre-flop, you should probably just re-raise, because you're going to make more chips playing post-flop in position the vast majority of the time, where people are just playing particularly poorly. Because like you said, like you haven't done a lot of work. Not many people have done work, right? So Tom wants to bet. We've bet 25% and we just get the fold. So we can just look in, and there is some larger betting on this board. Actually reasonable amount of larger betting. I'm not gonna lie, like I probably wouldn't have found all of these big bets. I mean, I think the usual suspects of ace queen, kings, aces, I get it. Tens. So I mean, I guess it would be a product of us having ace king at a pure weight, and they don't ever have ace king, right? So we have all those flop straights. We have we don't have king nine suited. Did we not true bet king nine suited all pre? No. That's okay. Well, I definitely true bet that. So I thought we would have had that, but so this board is the reason it's kind of interesting because like our opponent's gonna have a lot of one pair hands plus good shot and a lot of one player hands plus flush draw and stuff. So there is a decent bit of big betting, but I would have maybe been a little bit too respectful on this board, thinking it was slightly too good for my opponent, and I can't start pummeling chips in too much. But anyway, the small bet works. We don't need to talk about it too much. All right, so 10-7-4.
So I'm not leading, but I think there is some leading from the out of position player in 3-bet pots, and I don't know when, I don't know why. I think I've just heard that it is a thing, but I don't think I would do it on 10-7-4.
There definitely will be some leading out of position. I'm not 100% sure how much is going to happen at 45 big blinds deep, button versus cutoff, just because it's pretty capped and there's not going to be a huge amount of boards. Like when you look at the range that we play pre-flop, right, we have a lot of this Broadway area, but we don't have a huge amount of like the lower stuff. So like there's not going to be a lot of like low boards that we want to attack, right? Because our opponent's just going to have all of the overpairs. Our opponent's going to have still way more stronger hands. So I think in this situation, you're probably not going to see a huge amount of it. When I've looked at it in the past, it's been a lot of queen high boards in 3-bet pots, but 10-7-4, I don't think would ever be a lead under any circumstance in a 3-bet pot. Now, look, I could be wrong, but in what I understand of the game, like I would never ever lead this board. So we're going to check, and our opponent is going to bet 50% on 10-7-4, and we have a decision with ace 10. What are your feelings?
So I'd probably call, because if we turn an ace, it's going to give us obviously top two, and then they're just going to keep sending it with ace king, ace queen, ace jack, maybe even ace nine.
Okay.
I don't really see much of a need of raising, because you might just fold out like ace queen of hearts, ace king of hearts, ace jack of hearts, hands that you want to make hit the ace, I guess, on the turn, and you're not really too scared, I don't think, of many overcards. So
what hands would you look to raise on this board then?
So what's the thing? I don't know if I would have raises here. I just don't think I would. And obviously that's probably wrong. I probably should have some, but I just wouldn't. I would almost always just call.
Okay, so The way I would try and think about it is most of the time we're going to have raises, right? There's going to be some
Okay.
rare circumstances. And how do we generally want to put chips in the pot? We generally want to put chips in the pot with our strongest hands, right?
Yeah.
Like that's how you construct most of your ranges. You base them around your value. The strongest hand you have are how you want to put chips in the pot. What are the strongest hands we have on this flop? Like what's the nuts?
Yeah, well, sets. So like sets.
Okay, so sets are very well protected, right? Like sets, if we want to slow play here, 7s and 4s are going to win the hand almost always. When they bet 7, if we call on the turn, there's 28 in the pot by the river, like there's a pot size bet if it goes check on the turn. It's not a big issue, right? Ace 10 is a lot more vulnerable, but it's the best hand we have after sets because we don't have jacks. We don't have, maybe we've 10-7 suited, but like we have a little bit of 10-7 suited, right? But this is like the nuts, right? Like this is like our best hand, right?
Yeah.
And if you look at our opponent's 3-betting range, like the way we discussed, right, there is like a decent amount of 10x here, right? A decent amount of worse 10x, right? So we're going to stack that a lot of the time. I would be shocked if we don't raise this hand. I think it would be more of an issue of like what size do we raise? And when they bet this size, I think it's very tough for us to raise fold to 16.5. Now, I could be wrong, but I would probably just go all in. The pot's massive. Like the pot has got 21 chips in there, right? So I think it would be between, look, I could be wrong. I could be wrong, but I think it's unlikely that we don't raise ace 10. I think ace 10 is going to be close to pure. King 10 is going to be, when I bet this size, they might just all go all in. So I'm gonna shove it. Maybe we raise this, but I just don't really love that. Okay, so it's not the favorite play. All right, so it actually prefers raises. No. So as you can see, like our hand is just too strong, right? So like again, if we just look at the range, doing a lot of folding. The calling, as you can see, like we're never raising if we have a set, right? Like 4s and 7s are going to pure call, but like we're not interested in calling. We want to see what we are raising with. So these are hands that are raising and not going all in. And I guess we're pretty much it's our 10x, right? Like it's very vulnerable to a lot of overcards. Also, they get to realize a lot of equity because we're not going to be able to lead many turns. Like we're not going to want to lead many turns. So like. If they want, they just get to check and see a river a lot of the time. Like, we don't really want that when our hand is so strong but so vulnerable. I get the concept that you were talking about where you want to call, but the pot's massive here. And at this point, like, we just want to play for stacks. So it's one thing that definitely, you want to just be aware of that. Like, when you have top pair in a true bet pot and the stack to pot ratio is as small as it is here, like, that's as good as it's going to get for you. So you want to start getting the chips in. Now, that's like without any ICM considerations, blah, blah, blah. But like ace 10 on 10-7-4 is the nuts. Yeah,
it just doesn't get much better than that.
So there is a little bit of all in. And it actually, it does prefer. Maybe this board's just a little, like, I'm pretty sure if this was 10-7-4 with a flush draw, our response would shift drastically from raise to all in. But there's just not as much for them to. So basically, like when the board comes out with a flush draw on it, it's going to be a lot easier for them to find continues versus a small size. But like we force them into like awkward parts of the range. Like if we did we see what hand they had? They just folded today. Let's just
the same hand.
They the same hand. So let's just go through it very quickly again and see what their response is with other hands though. So we check. We're gonna go for the small raise this time. I think ace 10 they're just gonna go all in, right? That's whatever. We don't. That's not what we're here for. I just want to check what is their response. Like they have to find calls with ace queen. They have to find calls with Jack 9. I think that most people will probably find like there's a little slither of it's pretty honest. I mean that it should be pretty honest, right? Like it's a true bet pot and we're check raising. But like I don't think people are gonna like shove with ace king all the time. I don't think people are gonna find these little calls with ace queen. It's not a huge part of the range, right? Like it's only small slithers, but yeah, anyway. It's just something worth noting that we probably want to be raising here most of the time. Alright, so next hand, 8-7-6. What you got?
So I would probably check this board quite often, but that's probably because when I'm 3-betting, I don't really have much coverage here except for flush draws and overcards. Like overpairs, I'm gonna bet bigger. I'm gonna bet bigger with like ace king of spades or something. Hands that are just looking to get it in with if they re-raise. A hand like ace 10 off, I'd probably just check this back because we can turn a 9, we can turn a spade, that we can continue if the cutoff then leads the turn. But I feel like ace 10 with a spade feels kind of awful to bet like even a half and then they just send it or whatever and then you're just like, oh, okay, I guess I fold.
Okay. So I'm not 100% sure what the size is going to be here. 8 high and 7 high boards and the 6 high boards, like you tend to see a lot of bigger betting, but this is very connected. So I definitely think there's going to be some checks mix in on this flop for sure. I'm just looking at the range, sorry, that they have. Like they do have a little bit of connection around here.
Yeah.
So like if we had like ace deuce here,
Yeah.
I think betting half pot would probably be pretty good, just because like we make like ace 10, ace jack, maybe not ace 10, ace 10's a good shot. In an awful spot, ace queen without a backdoor flush draw an off spot. So, but Tom wants to check. I think it's gonna be close. Definitely think there's gonna be some checking. And then on 8-7-6-4, they bet 30%. What are your thoughts? What do you want to do?
I'm calling. I don't feel particularly comfortable just raise getting this in. But I also think our hand's way too strong to fold when we pick up the flush draw, I guess, and we still have a gut shot to what is like probably the best hand. So
yeah, I think that's reasonable. I would never do anything other than call here. I think this turn is going to be hard for us to start raising once we check back. Now we will have
some flushes,
some nut flushes for sure that want to check back. Nut flush draws and flop that are now nut flushes, but I don't think we're too incentivized to raise them. So in general, we're just going to be calling. Oh wow, it does want to raise. Okay, I would not find this. It's pure raising.
Yeah.
On the flop, they actually not love and checking, but it's kind of a mixed strategy. Like you can kind of do whatever you want. I mean, I would not have found a big bet on this board with this hand for like the reasons that you mentioned, where there's kind of that fear of having the bet folded. I would have bet small. But this is pure raise on the turn, which is actually really gangster. So the problem with worrying about this too hard is that it's a 60% check on the flop, right?
Yeah.
So we're kind of already in part of the game tree where it's not very common with this hand.
Yeah.
But like we can look at like the overall check. There is a lot of checking, right? It's just our hand doesn't love it. The hands that I would have bet big with are like this kind of bit, and it doesn't actually love doing it. Even it just kind of seems to prefer going small. Like these hands, I would have thought like, yeah, we fold out some better ace highs.
Yeah.
Like even stuff like if we have king 5 suited. No, that's a straight draw. That's a little bit different. But yeah, it's an interesting board. Tough enough to play. Would not have found this on the turn though.
No.
Like out of pure weight. I guess
like you can almost like smell that the bot wants to do it too. It's like I can almost, there's like times when I'm using DTO and I'm like, it's gonna be a raise. I'm not clicking it, and then you just see it and you're like, you're so gangster. It's just so crazy.
Just pure with ace of spades or 10 of spades. I guess they bet this turn super wide. Yeah, they bet the turn really, really wide, and then like it's like, yeah, good luck defending everything correctly once you bet this much. Like it makes sense to me that they bet this turn so wide.
Yeah,
you know, like that's a lot of betting. There's some big betting going on as well. Not a huge amount of checking. Like it's close to range, so like you really start to mess with people like when you put them in the cage. But yeah, I don't find that just not gangster enough sometimes.
No, yeah.
All right, so 8-8-6. What we got?
This is, I would again just default to a quarter because we do have over pairs that I don't see, but I don't know if they want to bet half pot on 8-8-6 because I guess we do have a pretty reasonable chunk of 8x as well from the button. Maybe this is a board that bets half pot, I guess, but
my autopilot would be for the most part to just bet small with pair boards, right? There's going to be some situations where you do have some larger bets. Our opponent here like has a very reasonable amount of suited eights though, so like I don't think it would be here, but whereas like when it gets to like 6s and 5s, maybe then you could have some bigger bets. But I would just in general in bet pots on pair boards, I wouldn't overthink about it, and I would just generally bet small, but maybe we'll be wrong. And now we see a queen of spades turn, and what is the plan?
I would size up with 10-7 of spades, and I would make it 60% because honestly I wouldn't find the hardest time just bet folding this one.
See, that would hurt my soul because we do have a straight draw and a push draw. I can see benefits to betting large. I mean, like we're gonna make a lot of king highs fold, we're gonna make a lot of ace highs fold. I would have a small amount of fear of bet folding this hand. But they shouldn't check shove the turn a huge amount. One thing that you will see in 3-bet pots, now I'm not sure if it's going to be applicable in this exact situation, but on turns in 3-bet pots, because of the stack to pot ratio, a lot of time you actually use a smaller size, and that's for two reasons. One, you don't particularly want to be bluffing for very expensive prices, and two, you just want to be able to make sure that you keep them in when you've got very strong hands. A lot of time they're going to be drawing dead because they're pretty capped pre-flop, right? Like they call pre-flop with a capped range. They only call the flop. So when you bet small, you force them into defending like quite awkward parts of this range. But we'll go with the big bet and we will see. See, this hurts my soul too much if we end up. But It does check and it does bet
Yeah,
small.
because I
So
think I would have either bet big or checked. I wouldn't really have found a small bet with this hand. But I understand now that you've talked through it. I understand it.
yeah, so like we can go into it. As you can see here, like the
There's
big
just
bet
so
does
much.
get used in this situation
Yeah.
a little bit, but it's reserved for a little bit more of a polar part, right? So like aces
Yeah.
kings obviously makes a lot of sense. Ace three, ace deuce, like these hands, we're
Mhm.
trying to target the ace tens, we're trying to target the ace jacks because like ace
Yeah.
jack and ace ten can't continue on the turn if we
Mhm.
bet here.
Yeah.
And as you can see, like the one thing that I would imagine you might have done it the opposite way is
Yes, I
that
would have.
if you look at it here, ace deuce of spades bets the least, and all
Yeah.
of the other combos bet the most, and that's just
Mhm.
because we don't particularly want to bet fold that much equity. Um, so yeah, I mean, like you can still end up bet folding when they bet small, right? But
Yeah, yeah.
it's not going to happen as much. So it's just one thing to keep an eye out on. That the vast majority of the time, now not all the time, right? There's going to be some boards where we definitely want to use the larger sizing, but a lot of the time we're going to see the smaller sizing sliding in. And another thing that just in general, not just for this spot, but in general, when you pick up equity on the turn, if you bet large or even if you bet small, like in some situations, like you just want to be very, very careful of bet folding
Mm.
high amounts of equity. Now,
Yeah.
it will feel alien sometimes when you have like Jack 10 of spades and the board is like, I don't know, like 8 deuce 4 and like this
Yeah.
might be a bad example and then like but then like the 9 of spades come in this situation where like you can't bet
Mhm.
call but like bet folding's like very expensive, so like you
Yeah,
might just have to
yeah,
check, right? And it's just
yeah.
it's very alien to us as humans to think about it in a way where like, oh, we turned a lot of equity and now we're going to check, like why am I not pummeling money in? But this
Mhm.
was a 50-50 mix anyway, so like it wasn't a pure check or anything like
Yeah,
that.
that does make sense to me as well. Yep.
All right, so not leading. King
Hmm.
7 6 3.
I'd probably check again with king 5. Even though we turn a gut shot to go with our top pair, we're gonna have 2 pairs here, we're gonna have flushes, we're gonna have sets that I think I would rather bet on the turn, and I don't mind just pot controlling with king 5 hearts.
Yeah,
Because if
I
we bet like 30% or whatever, they're not gonna fold their spade hands anyway. Like they're not gonna fold with the ace of spades, queen of spades, jack of spades. So
That's a
like
good.
they're just calling anyway.
That's a good thing for us, though, right? If they're calling with hands that we beat, so
Yeah,
like,
well that's
but
true. That's true.
there's nothing wrong with protecting your range, though, right? So like,
Mhm.
if you wanna check here, I think it's gonna be fine. But just like don't be worried about them calling with worse hands, right? Like
Well, that's
that's
true. Yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah, that's
obviously a very
true.
good thing for us. All right, so we get to the river and we have top pair. It has been checked down. What are we feeling?
I'm pretty confident we have the best hand.
I would say so. Yeah.
So I would probably just start piling in chips, and I wouldn't go all in with this hand, but I would bet close to pot, I think.
Yeah, I think when we bet close to pot, like if we were betting pot, they're gonna have to defend half their range. They have not really shown any strength. So like they're probably gonna have to start calling some ace highs. We're gonna want to bluff this spot as well. I think we can have two sizings. Like I don't think we always need to be
Yeah.
betting close to pot, but I think with some bluffs and with some top pairs, I think it will be good. Like I would agree. And then we want to probably have a block size with if we have
Yes.
6x, 3x, if we have pocket fours, pocket fives. I would pure block them, so it'll be interesting to see how it works. No,
Ooh.
it
Also goes
likes.
half.
I just want to check. Does it do the blocking? No, it doesn't. All right, I just want to like. This is interesting to me. That like, are we blocking? No, we're not blocking with those pairs that I mentioned.
Are they
I
just
guess just
checking still?
yeah. So it just this is going to be obviously a product of them having all of the pairs that I
Yes.
probably would have put some chips in with by this point. So DTO obviously on the flop does a reasonable amount of checking with sevens, eights, nines, tens, jacks, and queens. Then on the turn, yeah, it's still checking those hands a very reasonable amount. So they're just not quite as capped as
Mhm.
I imagine them to be. So the block bet, when you break it down, like just doesn't
Work
make
enough,
as
I
much
guess.
sense.
Yeah.
Like those hands quickly become bluff catchers rather than value hands that we can look to
Ah.
extract. So that's interesting enough. I probably it's just I'm just surprised that we can't have the bigger bet, or can we? Oh, so we can. We just can't have it with this hand. Okay,
So
so
choosing what are like our best kings.
yeah, these are not flushes, so these are all bluffs. So the reason why it's using these hands the most to bluff is because they block pocket eights, pocket nines, pocket tens,
Yes.
pocket queens, which are going to be auto calls, right? Like this is why
Mhm.
this part of the deck
Yeah.
is getting used the most to bluff. Um, 5-4, it's just the bottom of our range. It makes sense. Uses this size a lot. So just betting all of our kings for, was it half pot? Is that what it worked out as?
Yes, half pot, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I wouldn't have found it. I would have went with the small bet or the bigger bet, so I would have got that one wrong.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's go to the next one. And here on Queen 9-6, what you got?
Yeah, well, going back, if I'm trying to learn from our first hand,
That's the plan.
This is close to the top of our range, because we obviously, I mean, I guess 6s and 9s would need a little more protection on this board than on the king high board or the 10 high board that we had. But king queen is a really strong hand here, so we can check raise.
Yeah, we're definitely going to be able to check raise. If we're not, I'm going to be very shocked. As you can see, we have
a wee bit of ace queen.
Yeah, we have a wee bit of ace queen, and we have queen 9 suited, pure 9-6 suited. I wouldn't have anyway. So I mean, got it 10% at a time. I'm not having it. One thing that we don't have is the queen 6 suited, which you might see in some situations. But I think king queen is going to be a raise. I'm not sure if there's going to be a huge preference for having a backdoor flush draw here, but I think raising is going to be good. And then on this turn, what you got?
I'm not sure. I don't think it would be the worst thing in the world to just shove the turn, because they're still going to have to call with all of the queen X that we still beat. I don't know if they have to continue with like jacks and tens sometimes. And I don't see, and then I guess if we shove, are they still going to call jack 10 of spades or 7-8 of spades? I guess it just has too much equity to fold. I think shoving's probably fine. I would probably just go all in. I think I would go all in.
So with the flush draw, maybe we get to shove here, but like if that was the deuce of diamonds, like,
yes, I would probably bet small.
Okay.
Or the
and if it was a double flush draw board, it would always be an all in, and it would never be a small bet. So the thing about, like you mentioned, like the queen X, like they're not going to get the fold anyway. Like you know, they're just not going to get the hero fold the queen at this stack depth with the stack to power ratio. So we're going to stack that anyway. I would probably bet small here, and the reason I would bet small, but I could be wrong, is because when you're bluffing in this situation, I don't particularly want to bluff all in because we're bluffing into an uncapped range. Yeah. Like they have queens, nines, aces, kings. Like none of those hands I don't think are going to shove the flop. So it becomes a little bit dicey to shove into that. But we can go all in. I would lean towards the small size, but maybe because the flush draw has been turned, it does like all in. It does like the all in. Yeah,
but it's still
it's mostly all in. Like if that was the deuce of the diamonds, it would 100% use a small size. I'm pretty sure in saying that. But there is a lot of straight draws on this board, and a flush draw, which is not quite as bad as obviously two flush draws, but it does like the all in. And as you can see, like
it still does, yeah.
Our bluffs just become extremely highly equity driven. Yeah, like we're not really getting too out of line, right? Like we're shoving some king jack, but not too out of line. Like king jack's an overcard and a good shot. Yeah, and here, exactly. Like at this point, it's a pair and a flush draw. Like a little bit of 8-6, like a diamonds and hearts. Like I would never find that. Like I think that's I think that's fucking outrageous carry on. But all right, let's jump into. We'll do a couple more hands. I don't want to leave these videos too long, just because I want people to be able to digest them. If you get in the comments and ask me questions, I will make a conscious effort to. I try to get back to most comments anyway, but I'll make a conscious effort to like explain thought process that I may have missed. But like I mean, I'm learning as well here, right? Like I use DTO every single day to improve, and I don't know how to play every single spot perfectly, but I hope that you're getting something from it. And if you are, hit the sub button. Thank you very much, because my editor always tells me to shout that out and I always forget to. All right, we're going to check. So this is one of the first times we've kind of seen this larger bet size. And I think this is going to be, what we'll see is that on like ace, Broadway low card, they get to really start pummeling chips in with ace king and ace queen. And because we're going to connect with it a lot, but we're not going to have like the tippity top parts most of the time, it's a pretty nice spot for them to start piling chips in. Yes. Now we have jack 8 suited, we have backdoor flush draw. I don't think we're going to be folding, but like I'm interested like with jack 8 of hearts that we call here.
I was literally just thinking that. I was thinking, would I still carry on essentially?
Yeah, it's a really, really tough spot if you have jack 8 of hearts. It might be too weak to just fold, but like I think that jack 8 of hearts is going to be worth like 0. So obviously we're clicking call here, and we face another bet on a turn, and this is the situation where you'll see these smaller bets rather than the shoves, because like they're gonna
Yes, they
Just
can
put
just
us
do
in a
this.
horror spot,
Yes.
basically. So
But
what's your plan?
can you just check our range again for a second? Because I
Yeah,
mean,
no
because
problem.
we have ace three,
Yeah,
we have a wee bit of ace four, we still have ace jack. We still have obviously we have fours, but it's not much. I don't know. I would in game I would fold this.
yeah,
I would fold to the double barrel, but because I think they
yeah.
can just they can just check this turn if they want to. Like they're not always going to be betting, and they're
No.
still going to have a lot of equity. Like even if they are still betting here, they can have king queen of diamonds, and that just has so much equity against us. Like just there's just so many hands that I feel like I have that I would rather call than
Yeah, I mean,
jack eight of spades.
it's a tough spot. I mean, we have a lot of ace x.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if it calls jack 8 and falls like jack 10 and queen jack, and just because they
Yeah.
block some of the bluffs. But we can fold, and hopefully we don't get DTO blunder. Nah. So
Nice.
just low enough down. It's calling
Yeah.
70% of the time. It actually raises the flop, which I'll tell you right now, I have never done in my entire life, and I will never be doing in my entire life. I'm not really sure why, to be honest. It's just not something I do. Like I just don't find this.
Yeah.
All right, so as you can see, I don't know why Jack 8 is really raising. To be honest, like I never do this, and honestly, I don't particularly think it's going to be great. Obviously, the bot's playing against the bot, and it's just trying to be able to turn trips or probably or something like that in when it check raises, and it just wants to have a little bit of coverage. Would be my guess. One thing that's quite interesting that I think it's very tough to want to attempt to execute in game. But like these bluffs, pocket trees, pocket deuces, the three to the straight pairs are a lot of time where you'll see it come from. But if someone three bets you and then bets half pot on the flop, just fold them. Just fold them. I'm telling you now, just fold them. But in general, that is a good spot for you to pull your bluffs from against the smaller
Yeah.
size. But that's like, it can be quite difficult to execute in game. All right, we're going to do 3 more hands and then we are going to call it a day. This one on King 9. What you got?
I think we probably have some raising sometimes. I don't think I would raise 6-9 of hearts though.
Yeah, I think it's a board that we're going to see a lot of raising on, but
Yeah, I
I
agree.
don't,
I
I
just
don't,
don't.
I don't, I don't love raising with this particular hand. Like I
Yeah.
would also click call, but you never know.
So
So
yeah, it's just one of those things, isn't it?
yeah, I mean, you do if you look at it, like there's going to be a very reasonable amount of raising here. So we're calling 24% of the time, we're raising 28% of the time. Like this King X, obviously we're not going to struggle to
Yeah.
find that. These deuces, these trees, honestly, in a weird way, like I feel more comfortable raising them than like 9-6, but like
Yeah.
9-7 is pure calling almost. 9-8 is actually mixing to fold without a backdoor flush draw, which like I would struggle to do
Yeah.
in game cutoff versus the button. Like I would probably just click call, but as you can see, like we're just the thing about it is like I don't particularly want to raise because it's really awkward, but sometimes you just have to do the more awkward parts of the game because the problem with this hand is there's not really a good turn card for us, like with
No.
9-8. So like trying to make our opponent fold out some of their ace highs and whatever it might be, like they're even if it's like queen 8 of hearts or something, that's not a terrible thing for us because like they're just going to be able to realize a lot of equity against us. They're going to be able to put a lot of pressure on us down the street. It's just a tough board for us to play out of position with the weaker parts of our range. But like I would not find these folds all the time. Does it fold there a little bit with okay, it's not folding with a spade. Okay. But like even like just having like sevens and just folding when the button tree bets and it comes out king 9, like that can be tough to
Yeah.
want to do in game. But I think it makes sense when you look at it. Like again, when you look at the way they tree bet, like look at their range. Like it's just such a strong range at this point. Like it's a lot of trips, it's a lot of good shots, it's a lot of pairs. It's just we're in a bad spot on this board. It's just a very high equity board for the tree better in the first place.
Yeah.
All right. We haven't had too many opportunities on the low boards to see how we would execute a plan. But Queen
That is
8
true.
deuce, what are we going to be up to?
I again just stickler for small bets, but I honestly I wouldn't mind just checking back sometimes without a spade or a diamond. But I think
Okay.
that is maybe the wrong way to think about it. Maybe you check back with like ace jack of diamonds and you just bet the ace jack, hoping to fold out. I don't really know. I don't really see what we fold out that's better by betting. Everything that's going to
So
continue for the most part has equity, I guess.
so if one thing that like you're kind of touching on almost, but in situations where you think you're going to fold out a lot of better hands and only get called by the if you think you're going to fold out all the worse hands and only get called by the better ones, usually that dictates that you're not going to want to bet big with your hand, right?
Yeah.
That usually dictates that you're going to want to bet small. So like if you had like king 6 of hearts here like betting large might be a thing. I'm not 100% sure how much big betting is going to go on in Queen 8 deuce, but like I would want to bet big on this board sometimes. That would be the way I would think about it. But with Ace Jack, like I don't think it makes a huge amount of sense because like they're just going to snap fold if they have like Ace 10 no backdoor flush or Ace 9. They're going to fold Ace 5. Whereas like if you've got Ace 3 and like you bet large here, like you might make like Ace 10 Ace Jack fold, right?
Yeah.
So if we bet small, they are going to raise, and I'm not getting tuggy here. I'm just going to fold. So I just want to check. So there is
a wee bit,
a lot of checking, right? Big bets aren't happening so much on this queen high board, so it's just small betting or checking, which is kind of where you're at, which is nice. Queen high boards, I guess, are just a little bit too good, but I would have probably been tempted to start putting a lot of chips
like
in.
If you had like ace queen of hearts or something,
it's just not really happening though. The hands that do it, can't really see, but looks like a little bit of ace 5. Yeah, no, it's just a strategy that you don't need to worry about.
Cool.
All right, queen jack 5. What you got?
This looks interesting. I'm betting small on queen jack 5 with 10-7 of diamonds. I wouldn't be surprised if we can big bet here though. Or I say by big bet I mean half pot. Because we just have so much equity on this board that half pot is going to work with a lot of our hands. This is a hand I don't really think there's going to be much checking back. I could be wrong, and maybe if there was, this isn't half a bad hand to do it with, because bet folding with a reasonable amount of equity, backdoor flush draw through to a straight. I guess we can have some backdoor straight draws too, but like I'd probably just bet small. Yeah.
Okay. So we just get shoved on. Don't need to worry about it.
Yeah.
So I would imagine that on this board, so basically the hands that you need to be careful on, and on these boards where like our opponent has a lot of interaction, a lot of the time on the Broadway boards like this, like we are just going to bet small. Like as you can see, it's going to be far and away the predominant strategy. The ones that do check are going to be the ones that just can't take heat, but like are value hands. So like 10s can't really take any heat. Like once we get check raise, once we get shoved on, like they're dust. Like we have to just fold them. So like these like kind of parts of the range, and like the lower straight draws and like the weak jack X, like that's kind of where the checks will come from. But like if you're in game and you just bet small here all the time, like it's going to be a very effective strategy. Yeah, so that's just on the wrong handed. But yeah, so like it's checking 20% of the time, but 75% almost betting small. So it's just going to be fine. Like if that's just the strategy go for. I'm a little bit disappointed that the boards have all been very similar, but we'll do one more. All right.
Yeah.
Ace 9 6. How are we feeling?
I'm betting half pot. I just feel like we get to pile in chips on this board versus the cutoff, especially with our board 2 pairs and sets. Like we have our strongest ace-x. They're going to have to continue with all of their worst ace-x. They're going to have to continue with hands like 7-8 with a backdoor. Hands that have equity, and I mean we're strong but vulnerable, I guess is a good way to put it. Like there's a lot of turn cards that won't be amazing for us. And
so I would disagree with that. Like our hand's not really that vulnerable. Like if we had like, so the reason why we're not so vulnerable is that there's just no overcards, right?
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
There's just not a huge amount of overcards, and there's not that much interaction with the board. Yes, they can have 7-8, but like there's no other straight draw on the board. Like there's not a huge amount of interaction. There can't be an overcard. So like the reason you'll see the big bets go in with on 8 high boards, 9 high boards is because if you've got pocket 10s, any Broadway card or ace is just like really, really annoying for many reasons. One, like you will fail to stack their worst hands, and 2, you will also now not have the best hand a lot. When the board is ace high, that's just not going to be true as often. This could be a big bet, but the way I would think about it would be like when it's like ace Broadway low, a lot of the time we are going to want to do big bets, because they're going to have a lot of good shots and they're going to have a lot of one pair hands with backdoor flush draws. And then when it's ace low, like it's mostly going to be small because it's hard for our opponent to continue correctly. And like if they have an ace 9 or something, like not on this board, like if they have ace 8, you're probably going to stack them most of the time anyway. So this could be a big bet board, but it's getting to the point where we might just want to force them into defending more hands, which is where we go small. So we can go big, but it wouldn't shock me if this is a small bet board.
There we go. Okay, that's interesting. I never thought about it that way.
Yeah. So it's if this board was changed around a little bit and it was like ace 10 6 or ace jack 6, like you're going to start seeing ace king bet big. But like this is just going to mostly bet small. Right. So the hands to check, which we didn't really get to discuss because we didn't get too many ace high boards, but on a lot of ace high boards, because I think it's a product of our opponent having a huge amount of ace x that it's not hugely beneficial for us to bet kings because they don't need any protection, right? Because like nothing, like there's no overcards. Again, like the ace is already there. So you do want to find some checks, and then with the weaker end of the ace X, we didn't really get to discuss these concepts too much
Yeah.
because we just didn't get the right boards. But
Yeah.
we can do it again. We'll play this one more time. It's very like complicated because slight details change your strategy completely, right?
Yes.
Like I can understand because like they don't have ace king, we've ace king, they have a lot of ace X. We're going to stack them.
Yeah.
But they just don't have enough interaction on ace 9-6. Like they just don't, right? They
Yeah.
if you look at this, right? Like they have ace 9 suited and they have a small bit of ace 9 off, but otherwise they don't even really have two pairs. So we just want to force them to defend a lot of hands. They call, and now on this turn though, earlier on we talked about where you want to bet big or small. On this turn, we want to start be getting polar, right? Because I don't think that we're going to want to bet small with kings, queens, jacks, right? Like, would you agree with that? Like, they're going to be hands that you want to check,
for sure.
right?
Yeah,
right.
100%.
So when you don't want to bet those kind of like second pairs thinly, you usually want to start putting more chips in. Now, I'm saying all this, and I could be wrong, but this would be a classic situation where you bet small, you force them to defend wider, and then you go polar on the turn versus that range. So like then I would size up, and they are folding this time, right?
Okay,
but as you can see, this size is the only size uses this hand, and it's going to be very rare that we want to use this small size.
Okay, I do agree with that. Yeah, that would come to me more intuitively.
Yeah, the reason like look, we're betting 6 is small just because like it's an absolute powerhouse. We're betting ace 9 small because they're going to be mostly drawing dead because they're going to check raise like their ace 10 and stuff. But yeah, I hope that helps. Is there anything that you want to ask about it from what we went through there, or what?
No, I think it went over well for sure because there was a lot that I was able to kind of scrape at, and then a lot that I was able to learn from as well. Especially like it was good that from the start we were able to discuss like the ace 10 hand and check raising, and then I was able to implement that.
The one thing, like 100%, you picked it up and learned it. But one thing that I would just say to you is like, no matter what the board is, try and be aware of what the best hands you have are. And when you're aware of the best hands you have, you should probably be putting chips in. Now, that won't always be the case because there's some situations where our opponent just has such a range advantage that like you have to be very, very respectful and not raise at all. But like when you've got the top of your range, like normally you want chips to go in.
Yeah, that's fair. That makes sense.
All right, mate. Thank you very much.
I like that.
I appreciate it. And if anyone enjoyed this, please do get in the comments, let us know. And we'll do another one of these videos in 2 weeks.